HOA, Karen shot my 12-year-old daughter's mother, unaware I'm the district attorney. The gunshot shattered the quiet suburban morning. Bang! A single echo tore through the cul-de-sac. Neighbors screamed, a coffee mug shattered on the pavement, and somewhere a car alarm wailed in panic. My 12-year-old daughter dropped her backpack, frozen mid-step, her small hands trembling as smoke curled from Karen's shaking grip, the same HOA, Karen who'd spent months threatening us over community violations. And there, on the driveway, my wife lay motionless, blood pooled beneath her head, spreading across the concrete like a dark, silent storm. I couldn't even hear my own scream. Time slowed. The smell of gunpowder mixed with the faint scent of jasmine from our garden. Karen's face twisted, not in regret, but in self-righteous fury. She shouted something about rules, about order, as if a life meant nothing compared to her authority. I remember falling to my knees beside my wife, my hands covered in her blood, my daughter sobbing behind me, whispering, "Mom, please get up." But I wasn't just a grieving husband. Not anymore. She didn't know who I was. She didn't know she had just shot the district attorney of this city's wife, and that her life from this moment on was over. Hey, everyone, before we dive into this heartbreaking story, I want to take a moment to talk to you. Wherever you're watching this from, whether it's a quiet town, a busy city, or a small neighborhood where everyone knows each other, I want you to pause and tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from? Cityscape. It's always powerful to see how many of you from all across the country come together for stories like this, stories that remind us how quickly life can change in a single moment. Now, before we start, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications bell so you never miss another story that exposes truth, emotion, and real human pain. These stories aren't just entertainment, they're reminders of how fragile justice and love can be. Because what you're about to hear isn't fiction, it's a warning. A warning about power, arrogance, and how far people will go to protect their sense of control. This story will take you inside one of the most horrifying moments of my life, the day a self-proclaimed neighborhood queen, HOA Karen, pulled a trigger and changed everything. She thought she could bully, threaten, and dominate anyone who didn't fit her perfect rules. But she had no idea that her last mistake would be the one that exposed her entire world, because the man she was about to destroy was the one man she should never have crossed. All right, take a deep breath. Let's begin. The sound of that gunshot wouldn't leave my ears. It echoed through my skull like a nightmare on repeat, the kind that doesn't end when you open your eyes. I could still see Karen's trembling hands, the gun half raised, smoke rising in thin, cruel spirals. My wife, Elena, was lying there, her white sundress stained red, her eyes half open but fading fast. "Mom," my daughter screamed. Her voice cracked as she ran forward, but I caught her mid-run, pulling her back into my chest. No, don't look," I whispered, holding her face against me. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I could feel her shaking. She was 12, and she just watched her mother collapse in front of her own home. Karen dropped the gun, her face pale, but not frightened, not yet. "She attacked me," she shouted, hands trembling, voice shrill. She was breaking HOA rules again. I was defending myself. Defending herself? From what? A mother picking up her daughter from school. My wife hadn't even spoken to her that morning. All Elena did was park slightly on the sidewalk, a few inches over the line. That was it. That was her crime. I wanted to tear the world apart in that moment. My blood boiled, but I couldn't move. I knelt beside my wife, pressing my hand against the wound, whispering her name. Her eyes flickered. "Stay with me," I said, voice trembling. "Stay with me, baby. Please." Sirens wailed in the distance, louder, closer. A neighbor yelled, someone called 911, and the chaos around us blurred into white noise. My daughter kept whispering, "Mom's gonna be okay, right?" I wanted to lie. I wanted to tell her yes. But the truth was slipping away with every shallow breath Elena took. Karen backed away, clutching her pearls, muttering to herself. This is what happens when people don't follow the rules. She looked around like she was the victim, like we were the ones who had done something wrong. The neighbors stared in disbelief, filming with their phones, whispering in horror. When the first police cruiser pulled up, Karen rushed to them, waving her arms. She came at me. You have to believe me. She's been harassing me for months about her garden, her decorations, her trash bins. I warned her. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I stayed silent, because sometimes silence cuts deeper than words. 2 officers ran to me. Sir, step back. We've got medics on the way. She's my wife. I shouted. I'm not leaving her. They tried to move me, but when I looked up, one of them froze. Recognition flickered in his eyes. Wait, he said, staring hard. Aren't you? I nodded slowly. Yes, I'm the district attorney. The air shifted. Karen's voice trailed off mid-sentence. Her face went blank, then pale as snow. The realization hit her like a storm. The paramedics pushed past me, working fast compressions, oxygen mask, the red lights painting the street in waves. I watched helplessly, my daughter clutching my sleeve, so tightly her nails dug into my skin. They loaded Elena into the ambulance. I climbed in beside her, holding her hand, whispering her name again and again. Her pulse was faint, a ghost of rhythm. As the doors shut, I glanced out at Karen one last time. She stood on the curb, handcuffed now, screaming that it was all a misunderstanding, but her voice was fading behind the sirens. I turned back to my wife, tears streaming down my face. I didn't care about the cameras, the flashing lights, the chaos. I only cared about the woman who'd made our house a home, the woman whose laughter had filled these walls. And as the ambulance sped away, one thought burned into my mind like fire. Karen thought she was untouchable. She had no idea she'd just declared war on the wrong man. The ambulance ride was a blur of flashing lights and desperate prayers. My daughter clung to my arm, her eyes locked on the paramedic's trembling hands pressing down on Elena's chest. Stay with us, he kept saying, his voice steady but strained. I could only whisper her name. Elena, please just open your eyes. But she didn't. Not once. When we reached the hospital, they pulled her away from me. The automatic doors swallowed her stretcher, and the doctors shouting codes I couldn't understand. I tried to follow, but an orderly held me back. Sir, please. Don't sir me. I snapped, voice breaking. That's my wife. My daughter started crying again, and the sound of it, God, it shredded me inside. I dropped to one knee, held her face in my hands, and forced myself to stay strong. Sweetheart, look at me, I said. You're safe, okay? Daddy's here. She nodded, but her lips trembled. Why would she do that, Dad? We didn't do anything. I had no answer. Not yet. But I knew one thing, this wasn't just a shooting. It was hate. It was control. It was Karen doing what Karen always did, pushing people until something broke. 2 hours later, I was still in the waiting area, staring blankly at the blood on my sleeves when the news broke. A reporter stood outside our gated community, microphone in hand, as the screen above the waiting room displayed her smiling face. Breaking news. An HOA dispute turns deadly in Brookstone Estates. The shooter, identified as Karen Peterson, claims self-defense after a violent confrontation with her neighbor's wife. The husband, sources say, is the city's district attorney. Karen's self-defense story. She had already started spinning her narrative, and she knew how fast public opinion could shift. I clenched my fists. Even now, she was playing victim, just like she'd done every time she harassed someone over violations. 3 months earlier, it began with a letter taped to our door. Violation notice. Lawn height exceeds HOA regulations. Immediate trimming required. It seemed small at first. I even laughed when Elena waved it at me that morning. She must measure our grass with a ruler, she joked. But then came another letter. And another. Each one more personal. Karen began calling out infractions that didn't exist. The color of our mailbox, a seasonal wreath on the door, even our daughter's chalk drawings on the sidewalk. She's targeting us, Elena had said one evening, her voice heavy with worry. I tried talking to her nicely, but she just smiles that fake smile and says, Rules are rules. I'd told her to ignore it. People like her feed on control. I said, let her bark. But I was wrong. Karen wasn't just barking, she was hunting. A week later, Elena came home in tears. Karen had embarrassed her in front of other neighbors, accusing her of being a messy homeowner and setting a bad example for the community. I wanted to confront Karen then and there, but Elena stopped me. She's not worth it, she whispered. I just want peace. That was my wife. Always calm, always forgiving. But peace isn't something Karen ever wanted. 2 nights before the shooting, Karen showed up at our doorstep, holding her clipboard like a weapon. Your car's parked too close to the curb again, she said coldly. If you don't start following the rules, I'll make sure the board votes for eviction. Elena laughed softly. Karen, it's 2 inches. Are you serious? Karen's face darkened. Don't test me. Then she turned her eyes on my daughter, who was sitting on the porch with her school project, and tell your kid to stop leaving her toys outside. This isn't a playground. That was it. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I stepped forward. You don't talk to my family like that. Karen blinked, startled for half a second, then smirked. Oh, I see. The mighty district attorney thinks the law doesn't apply to him. Her words were venom, and they were a warning. Now, sitting in that sterile hospital waiting room, I realized she had meant every single one of them. A detective entered quietly, removing his cap. Mr. Hayes, he said, I'm sorry. She didn't make it. Everything went silent. My daughter buried her face in my chest, screaming, and I just broke. For the first time in years, I cried uncontrollably. All the power, all the titles, all the justice I'd fought for, none of it mattered, because when someone kills the person you love, the law doesn't feel like justice anymore. It feels like a cage. But what Karen didn't know was that I wasn't going to stay in that cage. Not this time. She had started a war, and I was going to finish it. 3 days after the shooting, my house felt hollow. The smell of Elena's perfume still lingered in the hallway. Her mug, the one that said "Best Mom Ever," sat untouched on the kitchen counter. My daughter, Lily, hadn't spoken much. She just stared out the window at the empty driveway, clutching her mother's scarf. Every time I walked past her room, I heard her whispering to herself, "Mom's in heaven, right, Dad?" I told her yes, but my heart said something darker. Mom's in heaven, and her killer's still walking free. Karen was out on bail. She'd lawyered up within hours, claiming mental distress and self-defense. Every major network picked up the story, not because of her crime, but because of me. District attorney's wife shot in HOA dispute. They made it sound like a scandal, not a tragedy. And Karen, she loved it. She stood outside her house 2 days later, wearing sunglasses and that smug smile that made my blood boil. Reporters surrounded her, microphones flashing. Karen, do you feel remorse? Was it really self-defense? She tilted her chin, pretending to wipe a tear that wasn't there. I feel horrible for what happened, she said, her tone rehearsed. But people don't understand how dangerous that family was. I was threatened. I had no choice. No choice. My hands trembled as I watched the interview from my living room. Lily was sitting beside me, eyes red. She's lying, Dad, she whispered. I know, sweetheart, I said quietly, but lies don't last forever. That night, I went back to my office downtown. My badge, my desk, they didn't feel the same anymore. I wasn't just the DA now. I was a husband without a wife, a father with a promise to keep. The detectives assigned to the case were doing their jobs, but I knew Karen. She had influence, friends on the board, people who'd cover for her. I couldn't let her manipulate the system I'd spent my life protecting. So, I started my own investigation off the record. I spent hours reviewing footage from nearby doorbell cameras, police body cams, and HOA meeting recordings. And the more I watched, the clearer it became. Karen had been escalating for weeks. Her tone in those meetings wasn't fear, it was obsession. One clip made my stomach twist. It was from a week before the shooting. Karen was at an HOA meeting, yelling about problem families lowering the community's standards. We can't allow rule breakers to ruin what we built, she'd said. If the city won't do something, we will. There it was, Her motive right in the open. The next morning, I paid a visit to Officer Mitchell, one of the first responders on the scene, a man I'd known for years. He hesitated when he saw me. "Sir, you shouldn't be digging into this yourself," he said. I leaned in close. "You and I both know if I don't, she'll twist the story until she walks free." He sighed, then handed me something from his folder. "We found this at the scene. It wasn't logged into evidence yet. It was a handwritten note, crumpled and half-burned. Karen's handwriting. She's pushing me too far. I'll make her stop one way or another." That was it. Proof. Premeditation. But I couldn't use it yet, not without exposing Mitchell, not without showing that I'd interfered. So I waited. Later that evening, Karen held a neighborhood vigil in her driveway. She spoke about healing and forgiveness like she was some saint. Balloons floated, candles flickered, but I saw through every word. When she spotted me standing at the end of the street, she froze for half a second. Then that smile crept across her face again. She raised her voice, projecting to the cameras. "We all make mistakes," she said. "Even people who pretend to be perfect." The crowd murmured. She was talking about me. I clenched my jaw. I could almost feel Elena's hand on my shoulder, her soft voice telling me not to let anger win. But anger wasn't what I felt anymore. It was focus. Cold, deliberate focus. Karen thought she had the upper hand. She thought her lies, her influence, her crocodile tears would protect her. She was wrong. Because I wasn't going to fight her like a grieving husband. I was going to destroy her like the prosecutor I am. And when I was done, she'd wish she'd never met me or my family. 3 days later, I sat alone in my office long after everyone else had gone home. The city outside glowed in amber light, peaceful, unaware of the storm brewing inside me. On the desk lay 2 things: my wife's wedding ring and that half-burned note from Karen. I stared at both for hours, every breath heavy with a single promise: you will pay for this. But I couldn't rush. I had to be strategic, the way I always was in court. If I made one emotional move, she'd twist it. She'd play the victim again. No, this had to be clean, methodical, and final. So I built my case the way I built every one of my prosecutions, piece by piece. The next morning, I called Detective Ramos, one of the few officers I trusted completely. "I need access to Karen Peterson's phone records," I told him. "Officially or unofficially?" he asked. "Unofficially." He hesitated. "Sir, you're the DA. If anyone finds out..." "They won't." Ramos sighed. "Give me 12 hours. By evening, I had what I needed. Dozens of messages from Karen's number, not to friends or family, but to board members. The HOA's inner circle. Each one more disturbing than the last. They think they can ignore the rules? Not for long. The DA's wife needs to learn respect. If she keeps pushing, I'll make an example. It wasn't a neighborhood dispute. It was targeted harassment, planned, organized, and fueled by ego. And the most shocking part? The HOA president, Martin Crow, was a retired city official, someone I'd once helped prosecute for embezzlement. I thought he'd vanished after his conviction. Turns out, he'd quietly moved into our neighborhood under his wife's name. Karen wasn't just enforcing rules. She was protecting him. That night, I drove to the HOA's office. The small building sat empty, its windows dark. Using the master key from my case file archives, evidence from an older complaint against them, I stepped inside. Dust covered the meeting table, and the walls were lined with framed certificates about community integrity. But behind those smiles and slogans, I found what I was looking for, a locked drawer. I forced it open. Inside were printed complaints, dozens of them. Families Karen had bullied into silence. Fines she'd issued illegally. And at the bottom, a file labeled Hayes Family. When I opened it, my blood froze. Inside was a photo of my wife and daughter at the park, taken without their knowledge. Notes scribbled along the margins, repeated offenses, disrespectful tone, daughter undisciplined. Watch them closely. I felt sick. This wasn't just control. It was stalking. And in that moment, everything changed. The next day, I took my evidence to the chief of police. He looked at the files, then at me. "You can't be on this case," he said. "I'm not asking to be on it," I replied. I'm asking for justice. He nodded slowly. We'll take it from here. But I knew they wouldn't. Karen had connections, people who liked their quiet neighborhoods and didn't want scandals. So I did something I'd never done before. I leaked it. I sent the entire file, every document, every photo, to a local investigative journalist I trusted, an old college friend named Rachel Dean. Within hours, the story broke. Exclusive. HOA corruption scandal exposed. Evidence suggests targeted harassment and cover UPS in Brookstone Estates shooting case. The internet exploded. Karen's face was everywhere. Clips of her arrogant interviews were replayed next to screenshots of her hateful messages. The mask had fallen. But Karen wasn't done yet. That evening, she called me from a blocked number. Do you really think this will bring her back? Her voice sneered. I froze. You don't get to say her name. You think you're the hero here? You're not. You're just another man who lost control. I could hear the smirk in her tone. Enjoy your spotlight, District Attorney, she said coldly. Because soon, the world will see who you really are. The line went dead. The next day, the headlines shifted again. Someone, likely Karen or her lawyer, leaked my unauthorized access to HOA property. They accused me of evidence tampering. Suddenly, the hunter became the hunted. Reporters camped outside my house. My office phone wouldn't stop ringing. The ethics board opened an inquiry. She was trying to destroy me the same way she destroyed Elena, but I didn't break, because I still had one last card to play. A witness, Mrs. Gallagher, a soft-spoken widow who lived across the street. She'd seen everything that morning but had been too afraid to speak. When I visited her that night, she opened the door, trembling. I saw her, she whispered. Karen aimed first. Your wife didn't even have time to turn. Will you testify? I asked softly. Tears filled her eyes. If it means that woman finally pays, yes. And that was it. The final piece. Karen wanted to play power games. She wanted the world to see me as broken. But when the truth comes from the people she used to control, her kingdom collapses, and soon everyone would see the monster behind the clipboard. The courthouse was packed. Reporters, neighbors, lawyers, people clutching coffee cups in curiosity. Every seat was filled. Every camera pointed at the same woman who'd once strutted through our neighborhood as if she owned it. Now, she sat behind a defense table, her perfect posture trembling slightly beneath the weight of the cuffs on her wrists. Karen Peterson, the self-proclaimed ruler of Brookstone Estates, the woman who had shot my wife and still believed she could talk her way out of it. I wasn't prosecuting the case. That would have been a conflict of interest, but I was there, front row, watching every word, every fake tear. The prosecutor, a sharp young attorney named Davis, stood and began his opening statement. The evidence will show that this was no act of self-defense. It was control. It was anger. It was pride. And it cost an innocent woman her life. Karen's lawyer, a slick man in an expensive gray suit, smirked. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this was a tragic misunderstanding between neighbors. My client feared for her life, a fear driven by months of harassment from the victim's family. My fists clenched, but I stayed silent. I had to. The first witnesses testified, police officers, forensic experts, the responding paramedics. Each detail painted a picture of chaos, not combat. Then came the evidence, the HOA messages, the surveillance footage, the burned note. But it was when Mrs. Gallagher took the stand that the courtroom truly fell silent. She held her cane with trembling hands as she looked toward the jury. I saw it, she said softly. Elena was just getting out of her car. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't fighting. Karen lifted her gun, shouted something about rules, and fired. She didn't even hesitate. The defense lawyer tried to shake her. Mrs. Gallagher, are you sure you saw clearly from across the street? Her voice cracked, but her eyes were steady. I've worn glasses for 30 years, young man. I know what I saw. The gallery murmured. Even the judge leaned forward. Karen's lawyer tried to object, but it was useless. The truth had finally spoken for itself. When it was time for the prosecution to rest, Davis looked toward me and nodded slightly. The judge cleared her throat. Mr. Hayes, would you like to make a statement as next of kin? For a moment, I froze. I hadn't planned to speak, but something inside me, maybe Elena's voice, told me to stand. I walked to the stand, my steps echoing like thunder in the quiet room. Karen's eyes met mine. The smug confidence she once wore, like armor, was gone. What remained was fear. I looked at the jury, then back at her. You think justice is about winning, I said softly. You think it's about power, about being right. But justice isn't yours to control. You don't decide who deserves to live or who gets punished for parking 2 inches over a line. I turned slightly toward the judge. My wife was kind. She believed in forgiveness, even when people like her. I gestured toward Karen, did everything to break her spirit. And maybe that's why I'm standing here instead of behind a desk. Because this isn't just about one life lost. It's about what happens when we stop caring about humanity. I took a breath. You called her a rule breaker. I call her my world. And you took her away because your ego couldn't handle kindness. A pin could have dropped in that courtroom. Karen's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. The judge nodded once. Thank you, Mr. Hayes. You may step down. The trial lasted 6 days, but the verdict came back in less than 2 hours. The foreman stood, voice steady. We find the defendant, Karen Peterson, guilty on all counts. Karen's jaw dropped. She tried to speak, something about justice being corrupt, but the bailiff was already leading her away. For the first time, she didn't look powerful. She looked small, pathetic. Outside the courthouse, the media swarmed, flashing cameras and microphones. I shielded my daughter as we walked to the car. Is she going to jail, Dad? Lily asked. Yes, I said quietly. For a long time. She looked up at me with those innocent eyes. Then Mom can rest now? My voice broke. Yeah, sweetheart, now she can. That night, I sat on the porch, the same one where Elena once laughed while watering her flowers. The air was calm, almost peaceful. Lily slept upstairs, clutching her mother's scarf like a blanket. I looked toward Karen's empty house across the street. The curtains drawn, the yard unkempt, a symbol of what pride can destroy. Justice had been served. But peace was something else. I whispered into the quiet night, You did it, Elena. You got your justice. The wind moved through the trees, soft like her voice saying, I know. And for the first time in weeks, I finally breathed. It's been 6 months since that day in court, 6 long months of silence, healing, and trying to rebuild a home that doesn't feel whole anymore. Some mornings, I still wake up expecting to hear Elena humming in the kitchen, her voice blending with the sound of the coffee maker. But then I remember that sound belongs to a world that ended the day a woman with a clipboard and a gun decided she was the law. Brookstone Estates isn't the same anymore either. The manicured lawns are still perfect, but the air feels heavier, quieter. Karen's house sits abandoned, its HOA Queen plaque rusting near the gate. Her name has become a whisper of warning, a story parents tell their kids about pride and punishment. And yet, even in her absence, her shadow lingers. The community held a memorial for Elena last week. Neighbors who once avoided eye contact showed up with flowers and tears. They spoke about how kind she was, how she always waved first, how she made the neighborhood feel alive. It hit me then. She'd done more good with kindness than Karen ever did with power. When I stood to speak, my voice shook. My wife believed that kindness is not weakness. I said, but she also believed in justice, real justice, not the kind written in HOA rulebooks. She believed in holding people accountable when they abuse their power. I looked out at the crowd, some crying, some staring at the ground. So, if you take one thing from this tragedy, let it be this. Never stay silent when someone uses authority to hurt others. Silence gives power to cruelty. After the ceremony, I walked home with Lily. She's stronger now, braver somehow, maybe too brave for 12. She looked up at me and asked, Dad, do you still miss her every day? I smiled sadly. Every second. She nodded. Me too. But I think she's proud of you. Those words broke me in a way I didn't expect. Proud. That's all I ever wanted, for Elena to know I didn't just let her name fade. That night, I visited the cemetery alone. The moonlight glowed faintly across the marble stone etched with her name, Elena Hayes, beloved wife and mother. I knelt beside it and placed fresh lilies, her favorite. Justice is done, I whispered. But I still wish it never had to come to this. The wind rustled softly, almost like a response. Maybe it was nothing, or maybe it was her, reminding me that peace doesn't come from punishment, it comes from truth. Before I left, I looked up at the stars and said the words I never got to tell her that day. I love you. Always will. The next morning, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, just my name written neatly. Inside was a small note. You don't know me, but your story gave me courage. My HOA president has been threatening us for months. I finally spoke up. Thank you for reminding me that no one is above the law. I read it twice. Then I smiled, a real smile, the kind I hadn't felt in months. Maybe that's what Elena wanted all along, for our pain to mean something, for it to wake people up. And that's why I'm telling this story to all of you watching. Because what happened to my family shouldn't happen to anyone. If you're living under someone's thumb, if you're scared to speak out because someone in charge might retaliate, remember this. Bullies only win when we let them. Stand your ground. Speak up, because silence is the weapon they count on. Before you scroll away, I want to ask you something, from one human being to another. If this story moved you, if it made you think, or made you feel something real, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. I want to know how far Elena's story travels. And if you believe that justice still matters, hit that subscribe button and share this video. Because the more people see it, the fewer Karens will think they can get away with this kind of cruelty. Let's make sure her story doesn't die in silence. Because justice never dies.